Hello, I am Chuang. Let's draw a green sea turtle, one of the most common sea turtles. When talking about sea turtles, people generally refer to this species. It possesses a typical body structure of turtles, with a large shell. Unlike terrestrial turtles, sea turtles cannot retract their limbs into their shells. Its carapace structure is identical to that of tortoises. Both consist of 13 scutes, including 5 central scutes flanked by 4 costal scutes on each side. There are also some complex patterns on the scutes, which all appear to grow radially. When drawing the carapace, we should first know the basic structure, that is, how these 13 scutes are distributed. Then, add the top patterns after finishing the scutes so we do not mess up the drawing. Besides the 13 scutes, its carapace also has a skirt-like structure comprising many small pieces of scutes. We are not sure about their numbers. When drawing, we can draw them smaller with more pieces. The turtle's limbs have evolved into a fin-like structure called a flipper. Its forelimbs are much larger than its hind limbs. From below, you can see that its forelimbs are very large, and its hind limbs are pretty small. Pay attention to the proportions when drawing. There are many digits inside the flippers. On the surface, you can see the raised fingers. A small fingertip is here, the others have merged into a large flipper. There are many large scales on the flippers. We also should depict these scales when drawing. Moreover, its head is very small, much like a parrot with a hook-shaped beak and a pair of large eyes. This is also a critical feature of it. Now, let's get started. Begin with its shell. First, draw the 5 scutes that developed from the spine in the middle of the carapace. They are basically hexagons, connected one next to another like this. When drawing these 5 central scutes, if you know they are modified from the spine, you will draw them shaped like a string of dorsal vertebrates. Draw an additional scute behind these 5. The scute near the tail is usually split into 2 pieces, and the one near the neck is often one whole piece. Next, let's draw the scutes on the lateral sides that are modified from the ribs. There are 4 on each side. When drawing, pay attention to the shape of each scute. Although shaped like those of pond turtles, its costal scutes, especially 2 rear ones, are still slightly deformed. Their edges are slightly curved backward. Then, let's draw the small marginal scutes on the carapace from the head to the rear. These scutes are not devolved from bones but simply horny plates. They all point backward like serrations and are not adjacent to each other. After finishing, you will find that the entire carapace of green turtles is shaped like a serrated leaf. Its carapace edge is serrated. The front part should be wider, and the part near the tail should be slightly pointed. Then, let's draw some radiating stripes on the carapace. The radiating stripes are generally thicker lines facing the front. We can add short lines between the stripes to make them look more even. In fact, the patterns on the green turtle's back are very complex. When drawing, We don't have to follow the true growth pattern but summarize and present them in the drawing language, so the general orientation must be accurate, and the density must match the actual appearance. Then, draw the patterns on the other side of the carapace, all radiating stripes extending from the back to the front. Let's depict the stripes over the spine. Like this, we've almost finished the carapace. Now, we move to draw its head. When drawing the head, we should pay attention to the neck part and draw it rounder. Then, draw its face shorter and pointed. It has a beaked, pointed mouth. Then comes the tiny nostril above the beak. Close to the front half of the head, draw its eyes at this position. Its eye sockets are large, but the exposed part is long, a bit like the shape of a human eye, with some folds around it. There are many large scales on the head. Typically, the scales will have black spots on the surface, so we can just draw some spots instead. Then, draw its forelimb. Add some folds at the base. Here comes its elbow, followed by its hand. The edges of the forelimbs are not a straight line. Here, we can draw a little bump representing its finger, followed by an undulated edge. Then, let's draw the other flipper. Its flippers also have many large scales with spots on top. We don't need to draw the scales, but directly black spots. What is worth noting is that these spots in the middle can be drawn large. We can also draw some smaller ones around the large scales so that these scales will have some changes. These relatively large and dense spots are generally concentrated in the leading edge. Those on the back half can be gradually left out because this rear part of the actual animal often becomes lighter colored. Draw some folds on the rear edge to make it look complete. The same goes for the other flipper. We can roughly draw a few lines on this side to show the boundaries between these large, prominent scales. The others can also be summarized into large and small black spots. Those spots near the front edge can be drawn larger. Draw a few larger ones, then use smaller ones to fill the gaps. After finishing the spots, let's refine the folds. Then, we move to draw its hind limbs. Compared with its forelimbs, its hind limbs are much smaller. The hind limbs are still in a foot form, with toes somewhat visible, and are not as pointed as the forelimbs. Then, let's draw its little tail. We can also use large spots on the hind limbs to show some large scales. We do the same on the other side. Finally, add some details. Draw some folds at the root of the neck to give it a soft texture. And then draw more folds on the front flippers to make the whole picture more complete. Good. Like this, we've finished drawing this green sea turtle.